I'm Art Noxon, and I'm going to give a talk that I've wanted to give for a long time, but haven't. And it's the power balance in the listening room. And what it's the balance between is the speaker pouring energy into the room and the absorptive qualities of the room, removing energy from the room. And roughly speaking, if you put sound into a room that has no sound absorbing qualities, the sound just gets louder and louder and louder, and until finally something breaks. No, but until finally the sound that is rubbing against the walls of the room is absorbed. But what makes sound be absorbed is the sound pressure that's in front of the sound absorber. So it's the sound pressure times the surface area of absorption, and that tells you how many watts of acoustic watts of sound that's being absorbed. And so what happens in a room, it's a way of looking at things. What happens in a room is that there's a certain amount of acoustic watts being dumped into the room, and then the pressure builds, the reverberant pressure builds inside the room until the pressure times the area, sound absorbing area is fixed. The pressure gets louder and louder and louder until the power absorbed equals the power being delivered to the room. That's the power balance. And
so you're talking about the size of the room, it's the amount of absorbent material above.
Yeah, it's the absorbing material.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the size, and we'll show up in the work that we're going to do. So now I'm going to bounce back and forth between acoustical engineering, which is my trade, and common sense. Okay, but I want to use the acoustic engineering version of things, and it's a very light-handed and unproven. In other words, I can just take my word for it. But the acoustic engineering version of it, in order to get to the end of to get to the answer. But I want you to see what the equations look like. I don't think you need. I am not expecting you to even pay much attention to them. So, in terms of trying to actually figure them out. Okay. So the first thing that we want to think about are. Slow the speaker stand there so I can do it. Okay. Words that we're going to use: sound, concepts. And the first one would be P, sound power. Now, sound power is delivered in acoustical watts. Okay. Just like electrical power is electrical watts, sound power is delivered in acoustical watts. So I'm going to. Okay. Another important thing is time. Another important thing is energy. So when you pay your electric bill, they take the power that's being delivered, which is the speed or the RPM of the little wheel, times the time, where they integrate that over time, and you end up energy, so you have to pay for the energy you use. So power times time equals energy, and that's what your kilo watt. That's what you pay for when you pay for your electric bill. Another thing that we're going to talk a lot of is room volume. And another one we're going to talk about is it's called energy density. Sorry, this is so floppy, it's kind of hard to write. Okay, so energy equals power times time. So let's get that out of there. Okay. And energy density is equal to the energy divided by the volume, right? Energy density. So, and we're talking about room volume. So, energy density equals the energy divided by the volume of the room. Energy density is very close to, is pretty much what the sound meter reads. And it reads it in dB, decibels. But it's what the sound meter reads, is the energy density. So 80 dB corresponds to a certain energy density. 70 dB, lighter, less energy density. So sound level is related to energy density. So I'm going to flip this now and see where we go.
Can you give an example of a case in which there's high energy and low volume?
High energy, low volume.
So I guess high energy density due to high energy and low volume.
High energy density. Oh, due to high energy and low volume. Because you put a lot of energy in a tiny room, right? So energy density, we'll calculate energy density here, and you'll see how it's related to room volume. But you're intuitively correct. Okay. So, but let's kind of take it in simple steps. Okay, so there's a room, and here's a speaker, and this is the room volume. Okay, then the next thing that's going to happen is the speaker's going to be dumping sound out, and that sound is delivering power to the room in watts. Then the room fills up with sound. We're not going to worry about what happens to it right now. We're just going to get our feet wet. So now the room's filled up with sound. If we take power, energy equals power times time. And so if I turn this speaker on for a short amount of time and then turn it off, I'm going to dump, it'll have a certain amount of power that it's putting out in watts, milliwatts really, and a certain amount of time, and I'm going to dump a certain amount of energy in that room. That room, that energy is symbolized by all these little dots floating around. That's the energy in the room. The energy density is equal to the energy divided by the volume of the room. Okay, so then, and if I'm going to measure this thing, I would be having a sound meter, and the sound meter might say 80 dB. But 80 dB is just a logarithmic form of energy density.
And it would differ as you move it around the room, right?
Well, this isn't a continuous situation. What we've done is we've turned the speaker on, turned it off. This is a highly reverberant room made out of solid glass that's got WD-40 on the wall, so it's very, very slick. And the sound is just ricocheting around the room. And it's not louder or quieter anywhere special. It's the same sound all over the place. So we're not doing hi-fi yet. We're just getting our vocabulary built so we can do hi-fi. And so this is just the sound that's everywhere. And it's 80 dB no matter where we are checking. Now, okay, so let's take a look at it. So if I'm looking at, here's the power, and here's time. So time is clicking along here, and all of a sudden I turn the power onto the speaker, and I'm delivering power, and then I turn it off again. You know, this might be an eighth of a second. And you know, the power is just a bunch of noise being fed into the speaker. Okay, so this right here is the area of power times time. And that corresponds to the energy that's being dumped into the room. The energy density in the room goes like this. Plugging along here, no energy density. All of a sudden, the power turns on, and the power turns on, and the room starts to fill with energy. And then all of a sudden, the power turns off. So this T here, this is the time it took that we charged the room. So the room initially had no sound in it, no energy density. We turned the power on, it built up, and there it is, distributed throughout the room, and it's not decaying out in time. If it was a sound
What's the
absorber,
line down then?
that's just telling you where we turned the sound.
Oh, I see, okay.
And if it was a reverberate, if we had absorption in the room, we'd have some sort of a decay of sound, sort of like the RT60 kind of thinking. Okay, but right now we don't have any of what.
60.
It's called RT60. It's a common way to look at the decay of sound, and I can explain that too.
That's a common phrase, RT60.
Yeah, that's your basic phrase. What RT60 is you go into a gymnasium and you have a pop gun and you go bang, okay? Well, in the old days you did that, now you can't. But at any rate, you take a book and slam it on the floor, bam, okay? And then count 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, count how many seconds you can hear that sound. That's called RT60. That's where it came from. It's a simple thing like that. Now there's all kinds of programs and downloads and things you can buy and stopwatches you can get and sound meters and gadgets that read the RT60. But it's really 60 dB is from loud to you can't hear it anymore, basically. And okay, so that's how it was kind of developed by Mr. Wallace Sabin himself. Long ago. Okay. So now we're talking about sound level in dB, and we're talking about energy density in joules per cubic meter or something like that. The sound level is equal to, in engineering terms, 10 log D plus something, it always is, plus 120. We won't worry about the 120 thing. Logarithms is always a ratio of something to something. And so this D is the density that we're measuring, that we have in the room, and this 120 is a relative of the ratio, because what we're really doing is taking the ratio of D that we measure to some reference D, which is the sound density at the threshold of hearing. So if you put just a little bit of sound in a room and it's ricocheting around the room and you can't hear it, that's your threshold of hearing. And this ratio is really D over D reference, which is the threshold of hearing. And that value is 120 when you take it out of the equations. Anyway, that's what I discussed.
You have a hard time with this.
Stan, I can't see what I'm talking about. Okay, so, and we know that V is equal to the sound power times the time divided by the volume of the room. And if we put that into the formula, we have 10 log P T over V, it's your V coming in, plus 120. Which becomes 10 log P plus 10 log T minus 10 log V plus 120. That's how acoustic engineers do math, okay? And it just gets worse from there. At any rate, so let's revise this a little bit. Equals 10 log P over V plus 10 log T plus 120. So T is the time that the power switch is on. Okay, half a second. So what happens is,
So what's 120?
that's your reference to, that's the threshold of hearing. Right. This is about sound level, like 80 dB, 60 dB. So 0 dB is that number. It's related to a ratio. Instead of carrying the ratio, they just work out that number. Okay, so here's this thing. So what we have is how loud it gets in the room, LP, is equal to 10 log P, which is the amount of power in watts, divided by the volume in the room in something, usually cubic meters, plus 10 log T. Well, what if T is like a eighth of a second? So 10 log T, that if you calculate that out, that's equals to minus 9. And then we have plus 120. So the formula becomes 10 log P over V minus 100, plus 110, 111. And that's the sound, that's a sound level that you read with a sound meter. So now you ask a question, and then here's your answer. This is the power of the speaker, and here's the volume of the room. Common sense. The more power is delivered by the speaker into the room, the louder it gets. The bigger the room is, the less loud it is, because you're putting energy in a room. So anyway, that's kind of where that comes from, or goes to. We can, and I just threw in the eighth of a second here just to show you like an adjustment to this thing. So what this is telling us is if we're shopping around for a speaker.
What if you move that eighth of a second to a full second? How would that change your?
That would just turn this into 0. And so it would go from 110, 111 to 120. And so if you're shopping for a speaker and you have you want the same sound level, you have a bigger room that's 50% bigger in volume, and you are worried, you want to know how much power are you supposed to be putting out from your speaker. Well, what you want to give a certain sound level. So if the volume of the room is 50% bigger, the power that's coming out of the speaker needs to be 50% bigger in order to deliver the same sound level to the room. Well, we kind of intuitively know that, but it's kind of fun to see it here. Well, maybe not fun, but at least it becomes visible. What you know intuitively is part of how the formulas go. And okay, so let's take a look at something here. We're talking about an amp. It's connected to a speaker and we have a sound meter out here, and we have sound going out in this direction. Okay, so what we have here is an amp, speaker, sound meter. We've got here electric watts running through that wire, going to the speaker. Voltage times current, roughly speaking. Now we've got sound coming out of this speaker. Now, if the sound meter is close, it's going to be loud. If the sound meter is far away, it's going to be quiet. If we turn the power here up, the sound meter is going to be loud. If we turn the power going to the speaker down, the power is going to go down. So an additional factor here is the distance between the speaker and the meter. Okay, so that's kind of a basic thing. It's floating in space. There's a lot of stuff left out of it. But that's our starting point with hi-fi. We've got an amp, we've got power going to the speaker, we've got a speaker that's dumping acoustic power out. Now this is electric watts, and this is acoustic watts. And in reality, it's milliwatts because an acoustic watt's like a bomb. Okay, and so, well, maybe a hand grenade. At any rate, but electric watts probably would work. Speaker sensitivity. This is goes directly to speaker sensitivity. What is speaker sensitivity? Well, it's 1 watt of power and 1 meter distance away. And what's the sound level? Okay. 1 watt of power and 1 meter away. And question, what's the sound level? So speaker sensitivity, LS, is equal to how loud the sound. You put 1 watt of power in, and here LS is the sound level, with 1 watt is the sound level, where you have 1 watt of electrical and 1 meter distance. Okay, so sensitivity is a good way to look at a speaker, because now we don't have to worry about. Now we can do calculations. Let's take a look at the format for this.
When they do the calculations, what kind of room?
There's no room here.
Huh?
No room.
So it's
We're floating in space, Bill. There's no room. The sound level, LP, over here is equal to speaker sensitivity plus 10 log electric power going into it plus minus 20 log, minus 20 log R. So how loud the speaker is it's the speaker sensitivity plus how much power you're driving it with, 10 log W, minus how far away you are from it. Well, it all makes sense, and this is the acoustic engineer's way of saying that in a way that you can actually do something with it. For example, if we have a speaker with 85 dB sensitivity, and we're putting 2 watts into it, 10 log of 2 is the number 3. And if you're, I think 5 feet away from this thing, this number here becomes 9.5. And the sound level is 6.5, and that's 91.5 dB. So you could look at if you know the power, because most of these amps have watt meters on them these days, and they're really great to watch. And so you know what the sensitivity of the speaker is, and here's the power going into it, and here's how far back you are from it. And this is called the direct signal. It's not looking at room acoustics or any of that one business. We're just looking at sound getting to you from the speaker.
Isn't it
And in high, huh?
Isn't it minus 9.5?
Minus 9.
88.
Minus 9. And then 3 minus 9 is 6.5. Minus 6.5. Thank you. So it's 79 approximately. Thank you.
Yeah.
Should have caught that. Well, okay. So now this is called the direct signal. It's what comes to you from the speaker. The audiophiles are very interested in the direct signal, and so because that's where the music is, that's where the magic is. The room acoustic is the problem. It gets in the way of covering that direct signal up. Before I leave this, let's go to calculating. If we have a speaker with sensitivity is 85 dB. And we're dumping 2 watts into it. The formula for sound power out, for the power coming out of the speaker, not the sound level at your seat, but the sound power coming out of your speaker is LS, the sensitivity, plus 11 plus 10 log power. So the sensitivity, so the sound power being generated by the speaker is related to the sensitivity. The more sensitive it is, the more power it delivers. And it's related to the power being fed it by through electrically fed it. And so the more power feeding it, the louder it is.
And what's the 11?
It's just a number that like falls part of the constants of things. And so if I wanted to turn this thing around, let's say I wanted to actually find out how many watts is coming out of the speaker. And so how you do that is W, which is the actual watts coming out, acoustic watts coming out of the speaker, is 10 to the LW minus 120, I think it is. Yeah. Over 10, where that comes from, don't worry about it. But LW, in our case, is 85 plus 11 plus 3, which is 96, and 3 is 99. And so this is 10 to the 99 minus 120 over 10 equals, this is supposed to be 99, so it's 21 minus 21 divided by 10 is 10 to the 2.1, which is about, anyway, it's 0.0. Did I make a mistake here? 12.1. Anyway, it turns out to be 8 milliwatts. So a speaker with sensitivity 85 with 2 watts of power going into it is actually delivering 8 milliwatts of acoustic energy into the room. Really tiny. And yet, you know that's loud. You just calculated it's 80 dB or something like that loud. And so it's the sound power of the speakers is very small. Okay, so that was just a side illustration of that. Okay, now we're going to pick up the next topic, which is room gain. Because room gain is amplification of sound because of reflections. There's 2 versions of room gain. One is boundary effects, horn loading, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the sound is louder if I can have a backboard to bounce the sound off of. So all of our measurements so far have been the speakers dangling in space, and at a certain distance it has a certain sound level, and that's what the sensitivity is about. Now, if we take that speaker and set it on the ground, the sound that was going to go down is now bounced back up, so now we got twice as much energy density moving forward away, and 10 log 2 is 3 dB, so it's 3 dB hotter. If we put it in a corner, well, the sound that was going to go that way got thrown forward again, and so it again got doubled, and that's another 3 dB of sound power. And so a speaker near a corner is projecting 6 dB hotter signal just because it's, kind of like a horn. If you put it in a tri-corner, it again bounces it up, half of the sound that was going to go down the length of the bi-corner is thrown again, that's another 3 dB. And as you keep closing that, now you're starting to make a megaphone, right? As you keep compressing that, the boundary gain keeps getting larger and larger. We've got horns in the show. What's their, they probably have a boundary gain of, 15 dB or 20 dB.
You mean from their horns?
Or
from the wall, not from the wall?
No, right? Yeah, right. Well, I was taking a leap of faith or a leap of something, but there's very little difference between a horn and a speaker in the corner of a room. It's just a goofy horn. And as you close those walls in, you start making musical horns and exponential and, you know, the beauty of horns, okay? But because a corner loaded horn sounds pretty dorky, but
You mean the old Klipsch horn? The quarter horn?
well, a quarter wavelength expansion in terms of a frequency response curve is full of resonances. That's why a trumpet does not have a corner as a horn, okay? It has this beautiful exponential thing, and those you can do a very wide frequency response and get no choking. It's a nice smooth frequency response. So but a corner is not a smooth frequency response.
So you're referring to just putting like a normal speaker in the corner of a room.
Yeah, it ends up being 9 dB hotter. So that's a boundary gain, okay? Now, so now let's talk about room gain. And you're going to say, where's this going? Okay, but listen, if we stay on time, we're doing fine. Okay, speaker outside. Here's a speaker dangling in the woods. And we're out in the woods, out in the field. It's hanging from a limb. And it's, you know, and it makes it has a frequency response. And it kind of rolls off at the bottom end, flat for a long time, and rolls off again. So high, low. And this is kind of like LPs, again, measured with a sound meter some distance away. And so it's a frequency response. Now, and if we play music, it has a nice musical, sounds great. Okay, if we take the same speaker and we put it in a reverb chamber, which is a giant polished marble faced room that, you know, the sound, if you clap in that room, it'll last 15 or 20 seconds. The reverb time of the real reverb chambers will be that long. Okay, what happens is, and you do a same frequency response. So let's do the same frequency response. This is very cool. So here's the outdoor frequency response, and here's the reverb chamber frequency response. This is a wiggle accident. This is how loud it is in the reverb chamber because of all the reflections for 15 seconds. Every sound that's made is bounced around for 15 seconds. This thing might easily be 15 dB. Now, don't worry about 15 seconds and 15 dB, but they are related. Whatever the reverb time is, the room gain is related to the reverb time, obviously. Okay, so but the frequency response is exactly the same as what it was down here because the reverb chamber stores all frequencies equally. Okay, so the room gain here is 15 dB. That is not boundary gain. You have boundary gain, the megaphone effect, and you have room gain, which is reflection effects. In this case, reverberation. Okay.
Now, when you said the megaphone effect, you're talking about horn speakers or putting a speaker in a corner.
Putting it on the floor is a horn loading, is a megaphone effect. Speaker dangling in air, and then you put it on the floor, it's 3 dB louder.
Because of the floor, but then you put it in the corner, it's even more.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And so I'm not trying to be talking about speaker designing right now. So if I use the wrong word, it might be distracting. But to me, it's horn loading. They're all horn loaded. The floor's it's a half hemispherical horn. Okay, horn is a boundary that reflects sound in one direction and not in the other. And that's what horn is to me.
It's a quarter of a horn, right?
A tricorner, yeah. Okay, hi-fi room. Okay, is your room as bad as a reverb chamber? Well, no, probably not. But what's your hi-fi room frequency response curve? It's not outdoors, right? And it's not the reverb chamber. So your hi-fi room is right in there, somewhere between the response of a reverb chamber and a response of being in an open field. And your hi-fi room is right in there somewhere. And yes, there's resonances that come and go, and let's not worry about that. The main thing is that to realize that, you know, you're not in an anechoic chamber, place that absorbs all sound, and you're not in a reverb chamber, you're somewhere in between. It's just important to see, when you're looking at the frequency response of your room, we take it so seriously, and, you know, and then we compare it to this, and then we are all upset about this and that and the other. Well, you know, it's in this zone between a dead space and a live space, and you're somewhere in between. And so, okay, so okay, so let's take a look at another equation. The sound level in a room is equal to sensitivity of the speaker plus amount of power going to the speaker minus how far away you are from the speaker plus room gain. Because this is what you hear. This is what your speaker's putting out, and then you adjust it for how far away you are. And this is what the speaker's putting out, this and this. Here's how far back you are, and here's the room gain. So in a way, this is the room gain. So
at this point, it's not yet taking into account the frequency dependence of room gain.
Well, I'm not trying to be that specific, but that's what this frequency response curve is kind of making fun of, is the phase add cancels, the modes, and all the stuff. You know, I'm just trying to stay away from the lecture will turn into a class if I get too serious about anything. So, but in general, this is true. Okay. Now, so next one. Okay, so far we've been talking about, now room gain is important because it becomes a tool, and you'll see it, I hope, very quickly. Power of absorption, right? A balance of power. We started off with the power of absorption is one power, and the power of the loudspeaker is another power. So the power out of the speaker has got to equal the power absorbed by the absorption, whatever that is. Okay, so that's your basis of power balance. And so let's start talking about the power of absorbers, okay, because that's the other subject we have. So basically, the language of absorption is Sabin's, S-A-B-I-N-S. And Sabine, I-N-E, is the name of the guy that was the kind of like in early, maybe late 1800s, but you know, there was a lot of geniuses floating around developing science in the late 1800s, and he was one of them in acoustics. And so he got the name of, so there's metric, there's English, and a Sabin of English is 100% absorbing 1 square foot. And in metric, a metric Sabin is 100% absorbing 1 square meter. Okay. So, but anyway, it's an area, and okay, and the amount of power that's absorbed by a sound absorber is related to common sense, the area of absorption, and how loud the sound is. Because if the sound is louder, if sound is quiet, less power is going to go through a window. If sound's loud, more power is going to go through a window. Same window, absorber, kind of all the same. So let's write the formula that sound power absorbed in dB, I'm going to say WA, is equal to the sound level in front of the sound absorber plus the size of the absorber minus some correction, adjustment factor. And this is for feet, when you're measuring your feet, your area. Okay, so here's the size of the absorber, here's the sound level, and here's the amount of power being absorbed. Power being absorbed has to equal the power being delivered to the room. And guess what this figure becomes, this is a sound level in front of the sound absorber. But what is that? Well, that's the reverb, and that's the running reverb. That's this curve right here, because this is what's basically in the room. Now, I know I'm ignoring corner loading effects and there's a bunch of details, but we're trying to skip all the.
So that delta is called LP. The space between the
No,
hanging in space versus the room is your LP.
This is called LRG,
Okay, RG.
the room gain, which is
Okay.
in dB.
Okay.
This is the LP. This is how loud it actually is
I
at the
got it,
microphone.
LRG, that's
Right, and this is the frequency response outside. So frequency response outside plus the room gain equals how loud it is. And how loud it is what's shoving sound into the absorber. And that's how loud it is. And so this is actually, and so LP is equal to, well, anyway, you know where it comes from. It's sound.
Again, what is LWA?
This is the sound absorbed by a sound absorber. The amount of power in watts. Okay. And so let's say that it's 80 dB outside of the sound absorber, and we have 1 square foot. So 10 of 1 is 0. Minus 16.5 is equal to 60, whatever that is, 3. Okay, the amount of power that is, if we wanted to look at it in milliwatts, so this is acoustic watts being absorbed, is the same formula for loudspeakers, is 10 to the, this guy, A, sound level A, minus 120 over 10, same formula. So it's the power absorbed minus 120 over 10. And so we're going to get over here 10 to the 63 minus 120 over 10 is kind of like 63 is 57 is minus 10 to the minus 5.7, which turns out to be 2.2 milliwatts. Well, that's not a lot of sound. So that's why, what you want is loud sound very close to your sound absorbers in order to pull the energy out of the room. Oh, loud sound. Where's loud sound in the room? In a real room. Where's the loud sound? Physics.
It'd be right in front of the speaker.
Yeah, right. It'd be
Yeah.
underneath the speaker. Be on top of the speaker, to the sides of the speaker, the wall next to the speaker. We take a look at high-end acoustic, ASC, high-end acoustic treatment setups, okay, like classes of object, here's what you do. Is the speaker out and open with no acoustics around it? Heck no, there's traps all along the wall. So you can get them, they're on the ceiling, they're in the back corners. We're sucking the heck out of that energy. We're not changing anything the listener's hearing. We're just dumping, we're absorbing energy out of the room before it even gets to the room, right? Because the goal is to dump energy, and trying to dump it, but by the time the sound has become reverberant and is quiet because it's filled the volume of the room, the sound in front of those absorbers is weak, and so it's a slow absorption rate. If you can absorb energy early, as well as keeping the modes from developing, because that's how they develop, is back and forth between parallel surfaces. So the traps to the side of the speakers are essential they absorb a huge amount of energy, and because they're so loud, and they keep the side-to-side modes from developing. The traps in the front wall, again, very close to the speaker, sounds are really high, and so not only does it pull energy from the room, but they damp down the end-to-end modes. So their strategy to room acoustics is not just walking around with the divining rod saying, ooh, this sounds good. You know, I mean, yeah, it started that way, but it doesn't end that way.
So you're talking about like removing the energy from the room before it starts reflecting all over the room.
Right.
So you keep the direct sound and
Yeah.
try to absorb everything that's not in the direct path.
Yeah, within reason. Because
Yeah.
because you always have to feed some stuff back
Yeah.
because you need ambience.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's part of the trick, is how do you get ambience going in the room? This is not about room design. This is still trying to just deal with the concept of power balance.
A couple times you mentioned the megaphone effect. How would this affect horn speakers?
Yeah, well, horns don't dump as much. Horns don't dump. They're very directional, and so they don't illuminate the room that much. You know, they illuminate the target and whatever's behind the target. So you put up some stuff, absorption and diffusion behind it. And remember, those horns are everything. A serious broadband horn would be a block long. Okay, I mean, there are no horns for bass. So the horns are always, you know, mid-range and above. The horns, what is crossover? Normal, the standard crossover is 2K with a little horn in it. Okay, you can get them down to 600 cycles, maybe even 300 cycles with some of these exotic big horns. 300? Well, that's middle C. I mean, there's just as many notes to the right of middle C as there is to the left of middle C. Half of the musical world is below middle C, no horns. Half of the notes that are going to be played are hornless. Okay? The speakers are so small, no matter how big they are, that in the lower frequency range, it's omni. The sound coming from speakers is omni. And the sound coming from the front baffle, out of the horns and crossover and all that, I mean, that might have some directionality to it. And so, but our world is bass, okay, because bass is the one that's out of control. Playing around with treble is like kids play. Controlling bass is the problem. Okay, so I don't know how Tara's going to do. Okay.
I'm just wondering also about open baffle speakers. Are those, in some sense, those seem like they're the worst offenders based on the principles?
Dipoles are they down. The thing with a dipole, which is an open baffle, is that it cancels side to side and vertically. In other words, it's not projecting sound sideways or vertically. Well, if it's not projecting it, guess what? We don't have to absorb it.
Yeah.
Okay, you're saving bucks. And so now all you have to deal with is the front wave, intercepting that, maybe a wall bounce, and the back wave. And how do you dial that in? And so you have to be very careful with all of that stuff. And because you don't want to kill the voice of the speaker, and you want to kill the ambience, because there's a lot of ambience, and so you have to work with the tastes of the listeners, but you still are obligated to kill the front wall. The front wall bass has to go away, because once it folds back, now you got to phase that and cancel off of the front wall.
You said bass, you're not worried about the upper range.
You don't absorb the treble, you diffuse the treble behind dipoles. Side scatter it, just create ambience. It just sounds so great. Okay, so where am I here? This is it. Okay, so I'm going to So I'm going to, this is funny. Hang on. Here's that. All this is that. It's not on the back of the piece. Oh, rats. Okay, somehow I didn't pack my notes. Okay, so let's, so now what we have is we've got the sound power that's delivered to the room through the speaker is equal to LS So that's this one. So the sound power coming out of the speaker is the sensitivity of the speaker plus 11 plus 10 log electric power going into it. The sound power that's being absorbed is equal to the what's called the running reverb plus, because that's what's impacting the sound absorbers, plus 10 log A, and is there a correction?
Running what?
Running reverb. Running reverb.
Reverb, okay.
Is
I got it.
is kind of like this one. It's the reverb level that's in the room. One of the things that's amazing is that the reverb level in the room is always louder than the direct signal, almost always.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you know, between 5 and 15 dB. And it's so it's a real battle to get that down low. I can't believe I don't have one of those. So you're gonna have to take my word for it. Okay, so now we have, so this is the power, and this is, I got a feeling there's something there. But anyway, here we have how much power is going into it. Here we have the running reverb. Oh, the running reverb has a formula, LRR, that's equal to the speaker power. Okay, yeah, that's the pages that I'm missing. So I'll make them up. Oh, no, I have that way back here. This one here. Remember this one? This is the sound coming out of the speaker, and this is the sound level. What was this one? Energy density. Oh, this is the sound level based on the amount of the power divided by the volume of the room. That doesn't look very good. At any rate, there's a formula for running reverb that, and so what we do is we equate this. In other words, L absorbed equals L from the speaker, and L absorbed is sensitivity plus 11 plus 10 log W, which is the power, and that's equal to the L running reverb level plus 10 log A. Okay. And I'm doing this from memory because I can't really prove this right now because I don't know what happened to the paper. I'm very sorry about that. But if we used the same speaker we've been using, 85 dB here, 2 watts here, and we let the running reverb be something like 90 dB. We calculate the A in the room. Notice the volume of the room's not in the equation, it's just the area of absorption. The area of absorption turns out to be 400 square feet, which is 20 by 20, which is kind of like a thick carpet and some wall panels and stuff. And that allows us, okay, so, but this is the power balance, and the power balance is related to, this is energy going into the room, this is energy being sucked out of the room, and it's related to the reverberant level in the room, essentially, times the area of the absorber. That's assuming it's 100% efficient. And so the amount of absorption that you have in a room, 400 Sabins or 300 Sabins square feet, is when you start adding it up in a really developed room, with a 3/4 second reverb time, I mean, that's what you have in those, is in those rooms. But the reason you have it is because it sounds right. And the reason it sounds right is, I mean, there's a power balance concept that's going on in those rooms. And anyway, so that's the message that I wanted to bring to you guys. And I'm sorry I lost the last pages. It's so embarrassing. At any rate, okay, so I guess that's the end of the talk. If there's any questions.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
So we're saying with horns, there'll just be less behind it, but it goes to the far wall and comes back at you.
Yeah, right. So you have to absorb it and diffuse it
Okay.
because you need that top end ambience, and you're not
Right.
getting it. You can't get it from to the side of the speakers, and you can't get it from the ceiling because that all the ambience, which is upper treble, is packed into the horn. And so that ambience has to be recovered without, slapping somebody in the back of the head. So you have to be very careful about your absorption, diffusion, arrangement behind the horns.
You mean behind the horns?
No, behind the listener.
Behind the listener, yeah.
Down the
Okay.
street.
Yeah.
So,
And what about big subwoofers?
they fit right into this. The power, so I don't know what you want me to say about it, but we're asking about it.
Well, I guess this is where it all happens. Wherever you put the subwoofer, there's going to be, what you call it, omnidirectional?
They're on the,
Okay, so the whole room is just,
well, it's sound going equally in all directions.
yeah. Because when we met before, you were talking about I can't even
Well, here's
begin
the
to explain about
subwoofers
that.
are rolled off, typically between 45 and 60, somewhere in that range. I mean, if you got a really crummy speaker, you may drag that subwoofer up to like 80, but nobody in hi-fi does that. It's always for the first octave, and the subwoofer stimulates. It'll have it'll play 20 to 40. So a 40-foot wavelength is 40 hertz is 1200 divided by 40 is still 30 feet. I mean, so most of what the subwoofer is doing is just simply pressurizing the room, pushing the walls out, the ceiling up, the floor down, windows out, and then sucking everything back in, and then back and forth. And when the subwoofer stops, these walls that have been set into motion, they continue behaving like thunder plates. And so that's what happens with subwoofers. And that's why the structure of the room, if you make the room rigid, then it's very easy to get loud bass, a subwoofer bass, because you're not wasting energy flexing the walls. And but the energy, low frequency, is stored very well in concrete walled rooms. So now you have to have serious bass traps. What we do and have done for 30 years is we make flexible walls. We used to call them music walls. But anyway,
You call them what?
music walls, because you
Yeah.
can play music in a room full bandwidth. But the walls flex, but they're loaded with viscoelastic damping material. Today, green glue is an example of it. Quiet Rock has a white glue, but ASC had damping material before these guys were out of high school that were running those businesses. So because we were serious about rooms and we realized we could fix the acoustic of a room, but there's something hanging in the room that we couldn't fix with acoustics. And so we said, what is this? And it's shaking structure. So then that came the next stage of the evolution of listening room design. And so it's called wall damp is our product for that. It works great. And what it does is it takes the shutter out of the walls, but it absorbs the bass energy. So it's like, how could you, it's like what you wanted. And it'll give you like a 1.5 second reverb time at 20 hertz without structural vibration. It's amazing, that it works so well. And it's very cost effective. Compared to buying bass traps for that frequency range, couldn't afford it.
So it's like aesthetically, you don't see
You don't even
anything.
see it, right? And it improves the soundproofing, so it bothers people less.
You can what?
It improves the soundproofing, so it bothers the wife
Oh,
and
your
the neighbors.
neighbors, yeah.
Yeah, less.
I'm seriously thinking of getting some open baffle speakers in a small room, and like what you said, luckily the sides and top and bottom aren't as affected, but the front and back
Yeah.
are. I've got really heavy bass trapping on the rear wall, and I'm only about 4 feet away from it. Would that be sufficient, or do you think I need bass trapping on the front?
Well,
I've got it on the front corners, but not right behind the speakers.
You're still going to get your phase cancel effect. I mean, if you have bass traps on the rear wall, the rear wave isn't going to fold back and give you
Yeah.
phase ag cancel. But the front wave
Right.
is hitting the front wall, folding over the wave traveling down. Those two mixed together, it's the same as the rear wave, rear wall. So that's the rear wall
Right.
for the speakers. So they both have to be trapped.
And the corner bass trap isn't going to suffice because it's not going to be right behind it.
Right,
Okay.
right. You have to figure out where that pressure hits that. By the time, I mean, usually it's like out of 6 feet or something like that. But the wavefront, by the time it gets back, I mean, it's spread way out over a large area, and you need to put two serious bass traps, like 4 feet wide, in order to punch a hole in it. When it's hitting the
Say it
wall,
again,
it starts.
4 foot wide bass traps?
Yeah, or two of them.
So we're talking huge, okay.
Well, it's either that or suffer. I mean, if the energy, the only other version of things is to put some sort of a large kind of gadget that somehow, but the wavelengths are so sharp, are so large, but that somehow causes the bass to kind of ricochet off at an angle. But for that, you have to impose some substantial fraction of the wavelength, like a sixth of the wavelength of a disruption, in order to get it to side scatter. But the goal is to get the sound to either side scatter and circulate around the room, or absorb it. If you circulate it, it'll absorb itself to death and it's gone. But you still have to. Usually, what we would do is put 2 columns of TubeTraps, behind a powerful speaker. That's not a lot. You need a ton of bass traps in the room anyway. Might as well put it where it's going to do the most good, and because it's going to.
And then you put them on the back wall also.
Because you have to.
That's right. Okay.
So, at any rate, that's the story of power balance.
Cool.
So,
I know we're out of time. I just got one other quick question. When people say that you have a subwoofer in a small room, they're like, how do you do that? Because the size of your room is much smaller than
that has
wavelength.
nothing to do with. I don't know what these guys are talking about.
Yeah, right.
And I hear it all the time.
What you're saying?
What
put a small-
people say that you need to develop a substantial fraction of the wavelength in order for the subwoofer to work. The subwoofer
it's a pressure
loves.
cooker.
Yeah, right. It's a pressure cooker. It's the low frequency. So all that we're doing is raising the frequency of the pressure cooker version,
Yeah.
which is the piston moves forward. The wavelengths aren't developed, but the pressure builds in the room. It's a great way for a small subwoofer to produce bass.
Yeah.
It is in a small room, and so the question is, when a subwoofer stops, is the bass, where's that energy going? Because the subwoofer goes, okay, and then it's just because the air has still been set in motion, and then it just continues being in motion, and so it's not. So you still have to get rid of it. So you end up with. It's almost as if you need. I hate to say it, but when you're working on rooms, you almost need as much acoustics in a small room as you do in a big room. And in a big room, it kind of fits and it's okay. In a small room, it's like that's all you see.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can this small room cost so much as a big room? I said, well, because the formula is A. It is not.
Yeah.
There's no volume element in the formula. It's about the absorption. It's a function of absorption. It's a hard concept to get in. Was in my mind when I first studied acoustic engineering, is the issues are always, like the RT60, what is it a function of? The absorption. Not the size of the gymnasium. What do you mean not the size? How could it not be? Well, because it drops out as you go through the process. It's just amount of how much absorption is in the space, and it doesn't matter how big the space is.
Yeah.
And, you know,
It affects your reverb time and the sound effects, but not the.
we're talking about the reverb time is a function of the absorption, savings of absorption only.
Wow. So a small room reverb time wouldn't be shorter than a large room reverb time?
It's only a function of the absorption.
For a given amount of absorption.
Okay. I followed you up into then because it seems like if you're in a big room, the echo effect, like a big cathedral, you know, it echoes the frequency between the reverb would be, you know what reverb is?
Well, there's a difference between flutter echo and the ricocheting around of sound. Reverb is not that. I mean, this is just a very small amount of high frequency energy, and it demonstrates an effect. But reverb is all the frequencies that are being played have circulated through the room enough times that all traces of their musical existence, where they came from and what sounds they were making, are lost. So it's turning into chaos. But it's still quivering. The molecules are still quivering. They're still pushing on your eardrums. And at any rate, the bottom line is that the reverb time, the decay rate of sound in a room, is not a function of the room volume, despite intuition. It's only a function of the absorption that's in the
So that's good news for people with big rooms. Because it doesn't visually affect the room as much as it does in a small room.
Well, usually in big rooms, you're putting out a huge amount of power in order to, right, there's no free lunch. You're putting out a huge amount of power in order to send a direct signal that everyone can hear. And then now so the reverb starts very loud and dies out. But in a small room, you have low power, but it's still, because you're only going this far. It's time for me to go.